Ben Gleason grew up in Edna, Minnesota, and there he attended the Lamont School of Music. He attended the Lamont School of Music in Denver for 2 years. After leaving to pursue his creative passions full-time, Ben discovered the Flotation Tank. His first experience there led him to start exercising, eating organic, losing 100 pounds, quit smoking, and thinking positively. This Isolate Flotation Center he started in May 2012 has helped countless people and has had awe-inspiring transformational experiences on many. Please put your hands together this evening for Mr. Gleason.
Thank you. My name's Ben, and I own Isolate Flotation Center here in Boulder. And, we're talking about hacking and how it's most effective when we can really hack into our own abilities and have, people come into our lives or tools come into our lives that really help us hack into our own abilities. And I think the Flotation Tank, for me and many other people, has really helped to tune in, hack into our greatest potential as human beings. So a flotation tank, also known as an isolation tank or a sensory deprivation tank, is a large enclosed saltwater bath that's meant to minimize sensory input to the brain. It's got 10 inches of water, 900 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved into the water, so anyone, no matter what their body type, no matter how dense they are, can float like a cork on top of the water. It's dark, it's silent, there's nothing to smell or taste. The water's the same temperature as your skin, and the air's the same temperature as your skin, so there's really nothing for your body to feel. It's really good for deep states of relaxation, deep pain relief, deep states of meditation, heightened self-awareness, and it's really great for a lot of other things too. And if you're interested in all the great benefits that a flotation tank has, check out The Book of Floating by Michael Hutchison. It's a great book. It goes through every single thing that a flotation tank can help your life with. But the four big things that have really helped me are deep relaxation, pain relief, meditation, and self-awareness. And I think it's really great for pain relief and relaxation because it gives your body an environment of homeostasis. And the body is really effective at healing itself when it's given a chance to operate freely. And in the float tank, there's really nothing preventing it from doing its job. So it can function very, very well at healing itself and getting itself back up to optimum capacity. It's also great for deep states of meditation because it slows your brain waves down, and it's great for heightened self-awareness because it gives you a sense of what you are without the physical world, who you are, what you are without your body. And those types of experiences for me have really started to break open any sort of ideas I had about what I was previously. It gives me a chance to experience myself purely as consciousness without anything else there. It was invented in 1954 by John C. Lilly, who was wanting to answer some questions out of a debate in the scientific community as to what would happen if sensory input was removed from the brain. There were a lot of people who believed that the brain was an organ that responded to stimulus, and that if stimulus was taken away from it, that the brain would basically shut down and the person would go into a state of a coma or a dreamless sleep, something along those lines. And then there were other people like John Lilly who thought that if the brain was put into a senseless environment, it would continue to function normally, and it might even create its own sensory information without the presence of physical sensory input. And it turns out he was right. He has reported a lot of really interesting experiences. He doesn't call them hallucinations. He always felt that hallucination was a derogatory term or had some negative connotations, so he likes to call it displays. He talks about how the auditory cortex and the visual cortex will actually display new information to you, even though there's no external information present. I've read a lot of stories of his where he goes into the float tank and travels off into alien planets, communicates with alien beings that have great information to communicate with him, and none of this is coming from the external world. And it's also happening without any drugs or anything like that. Just relaxation in a senseless environment can give you some really amazing experiences. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about questions that people have One of the biggest questions that comes up is, can I drown? I'm going to be relaxing in this bathtub probably more than I've ever relaxed in my entire life. What happens if I turn over? Well, I've never turned over. No one's ever drowned in a flotation tank. There was one person who made their own flotation tank in their bathtub and took a lot of drugs and went in and drowned, but I would say that it's probably the drugs that drowned him. So no one's drowned in a real float tank. Drugs are not. And so it's a very safe thing to use. There's a lot of people that wonder if pregnant women can float. It's been shown that pregnant women have a great time floating. A lot of times the mother feels like when they're most relaxed is when the baby is actually starting to get more energized. And in a float tank, for some reason, when the mother goes in, the baby completely zonks out as well. So it's really great for people looking to get some rest carrying a baby, for sure. And probably the biggest question that comes up is, I'm claustrophobic, can I float? And I think that, yes, most definitely. I didn't click this. Most definitely, I've had hundreds of people come in worried about being claustrophobic. And I always tell them that you can use the tank with the door open. You can float with your head at the door end. So then it's more of like an elaborate bath at this point. Your head's in the room, but your body's still in the float tank, getting all the good benefits from that. And most everyone that's come in being afraid of being claustrophobic says that they close the door for at least some period of time and that they feel like it was a better experience with the door closed, and they'll feel like they won't be as claustrophobic in the rest of their life because of the experience they had in the tank. And I think that fear is something that really does come up a lot, especially around float tank sessions, especially around the first one. But for me, even still, I have fears going into the tank, and I've used it hundreds of times now. And I always tell people that fear is probably one of the most healing experiences of the float tank, because in my experience, facing fears and seeing them as being something that really there's nothing to be afraid of has been one of the most beneficial practices I have in my life. So I think going into the float tank, whether or not there's something that you're afraid of, if you can go in there and really look at it and see through it clearly, you'll see that there was really nothing to be afraid of. And I've had tons of people come out and be like, wow, that was amazing. And they go in like, I don't know, this is scary. So I think fear is probably some of the best medicine when it comes to the float tank, for sure. And I'd like to share my story a little bit. That's me when I was 22. For most of my life, I was depressed and I was suicidal. I ate horrible food. For most of my adult life, I was 300 pounds. I smoked a half pack of cigarettes a day. I ate fast food for every meal. I didn't think about exercising for years before my first float session. I felt like my body was deteriorating, and I really just wasn't enjoying the life that I had. And when I was 22, I started listening to the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. And Joe, on his podcast, all the time talked about the benefits of healthy eating, the benefits of regular exercise, the benefits of positive thinking. And also he would talk a lot about the benefits of using a float tank on a regular basis. When Joe was young, he saw the movie Altered States, which, if any of you have seen it, it's not necessarily the best depiction of floating, but it definitely opened a lot of people's minds to the idea of the float tank. And one of those people was Joe Rogan. And so he'd wanted to try one for most of his life, and eventually got one in his house and uses it all the time and talks about it on his podcast and how beneficial it is. So I heard him talking about it on the podcast, and I thought, man, that sounds really amazing. I got to go try that out. So I went down to Denver, and I had my first float session. It was an hour-long float session. And for the first 50 minutes of my float session, I didn't really feel relaxed or expansive. It wasn't what I was expecting from Joe's description of it. So I could really feel my brain worrying. Is this error? Is this threat? Am I in danger here? Or is this some new, novel way to experience myself? And there was a lot of questions that came up. You know, am I really safe? Is the water going to hold me? Am I going to leave my body? If I leave my body, can I come back to my body? All those questions. And really, towards the end of my float session, as my mind started to slow down and as I relaxed more, I started to feel more relaxed than I'd ever felt in my life. I'd spent a long time feeling anxious, and I had felt finally in those last 10 minutes like there wasn't anything to be afraid of anymore. I felt completely accepted and supported and loved by the universe. It was this feeling of unconditional joy and bliss, unconditional love. It was absolutely phenomenal, and nothing itself is actually what gave it to me. I kind of spent my whole life trying to fill this hole with something outside of myself, thinking that it would give me satisfaction, when really it didn't do anything. It was a Band-Aid solution at best, and really just left me feeling worse in the long run. And so in that last 10 minutes of my float session, I felt like that hole that I was looking to fill actually got filled, and it was filled by nothingness itself. And really, it seemed to me like that sensation of unconditional acceptance was actually there all the time, and I was preventing myself from experiencing it by living my life in a way that was out of alignment with how I really wanted to live my life. And so laying in the float tank, realizing all these things, thinking, man, I never want to get out of here. This is the best feeling I've ever had. They come knock on the door and tell me to get out, and I'm a nice person, so I decided not to make them drag me out. And I got out, and everything was different. The walls seemed like they were breathing. The floor seemed like it was full of life. It seemed like that sense of unconditional joy and unconditional love was permeating everything I experienced and everyone that I met. It was really one of the greatest experiences that I'd ever had. And so after that session, I got home, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I was like, man, I'm just not doing what it takes to be happy right now. I've spent my whole life looking for something outside of myself to come make me happy so that I didn't have to do the work. But I'm ready to do the work, and I can see now that if I do the work, I can experience joy in every single moment of my life. And so I made a decision right then and there to stop thinking negatively. I decided anytime I had a suicidal thought or any sort of negative thought, I would replace it with a thought that I really wanted to hear. And being diligent with it, I really did repattern my brain and rewired it in a way where I don't have negative thought patterns very strongly entrained into my brain anymore, which is amazing. I started eating organic pretty much right after my first float session. I quit smoking cigarettes about a month after my first float session. And eventually I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and yoga. And I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and yoga for 6 days a week. And in the course of about 4 months, I lost about 80 pounds. And over the course of the year from that float session, I lost 100 pounds. And in that year of my transformation, I was at a jiu-jitsu class one day, and I got done. And I was like, man, it'd be really fun to go have a float session up here in Boulder. I'm sure there's a float tank center somewhere around here. And I'm looking at my phone, and oh, no, there's not. So I decided that would be a really fun thing to do, is start a float center in Boulder, and what a perfect place. So I got my business plan together, and we opened our place in May of 2012. And I think my biggest intention for my business is to create a space where people can really come experience the float tank without anything distracting them from that experience. There was a lot of things at other float centers that I didn't really enjoy. There were places that had 2 tanks in one room, so if you ever had to get out to go to the bathroom and somebody's getting out at the same time as it's the end of their float session, there's 2 naked people, and you have that, oh gosh. And there's a lot of noise coming through. There wasn't a bathroom in the room, so you had to actually leave the room and go stare at bright lights and all this stuff. So I really wanted to make it a place where it was almost like you come in, lock the door, you don't leave at all, and you really just get into yourself and really start to have a clearer understanding of who and what you are as a human being. And I think that if you guys are inspired to try a float session, I think that doing one float session will do wonders for you. One float session really did change my life. It took me from looking like that person to looking like this person today, and feeling like this person today too. So, but I think that floating on a regular basis has probably been the most beneficial thing that I do for myself continuously. And it's because I get a chance to tune back into that frequency of unconditional love, of unconditional acceptance. Each time that I get into the float tank, it's like I'm tuning myself back in, and I can see what parts of my life are resonating with that and what parts of my life aren't. And it's given me the ability to really see how my thoughts affect my reality. It's shown me that my thoughts directly affect how I experience the world, and that I'm in complete control of my thoughts. And so if I start to look at the world in a different way and see the positive in everything, it's really allowed me to experience the joy in every single moment. And by doing so, I feel like I've really hacked into my own abilities as a human being. And I think the float tank is probably one of the best tools that we have for hacking the planet, because it's one of the best tools we have for hacking ourselves. When we really unlock our true potential as human beings, the amount of change that we can affect on this planet is unfathomable and it's unstoppable. So I hope that I've inspired you all to go try a float tank session. If you live in Boulder or you're in the Colorado area, go to our website, www.isolatefc.com, and enter the coupon code HACK for $10 off. So thank you very much, and have a good night.